Welcome back to Bread and Butter, everybody. We're serving up the basics for Hearthstone improvement in episode 79, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Tito. Tito, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Doc. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, thanks for asking. And we have a very special returning guest today, WorldEight. WorldEight, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on the show. Always a pleasure.
And it's always a pleasure to have you. Thank you. So, just going to get off right on the top with this. Unfortunately, people will know by the time you listen to this that the Hearthstone community and the gaming community and game dev lost a very special person this last week. Super blind guy. We had him as a guest on the show. He was very fun to talk to, very informative, had a very, very neat perspective that a lot of people don't have. And it was very, very fun and enlightening to have him on. I just wanted to get my feelings out at the top of the show. Because I know I will miss him. He was a fun guest. It was fun seeing the work he was doing, not only with the Hearthstone accessibility community, but like working on Forza and working on The Last of Us. He was a very talented individual, and he will be severely missed.
Yeah, same. He was like, so you guys heard me promoting my new podcast the last couple weeks. He is the reason I even thought about doing that, because he said that there needed to be more content out there like that, like Lister Guy does. And one of the coolest things in one of the last conversations I had with him, so when he was little, he had Make-A-Wish Foundation. He got to do that. Apparently, and I don't know if he was able to get this done or not because of he had cancer. But somebody actually picked him as their Make-A-Wish. Like, they wanted to meet him. Like, people on Make-A-Wish, they go to Disney World, they meet John Cena. Somebody's Make-A-Wish was to meet this guy, Super Blind Guy. So if that doesn't tell you how special somebody is, then, I don't know what it is. We're going to miss him a lot. Yeah.
It's always a shame to lose someone in the community. Personally, I was not familiar with his work and did not, interact with him at all. But all I've heard is tremendous respect for him. So I'm sure he will be very much missed.
Yeah, just a positive and amazing force on the community. So, but we are here to actually talk about Hearthstone as well. So, Doc, what have you been doing inside of the game of Hearthstone?
Yeah, I've just been playing a couple BGs. Still, I mean, I know you saw the power of dragons.
Yes.
I won't get into that because that's your news to share. But it's still, dragons are bust for me, as is my current experience with Battlegrounds. They're just a fun tribe, can be a very strong tribe. I tried to go like a death rattle build, and I've tried to do like different like elemental builds. The elemental builds were fun. I just couldn't scale fast enough, so I got very, very much outpaced in top 4. But yeah, I mean, Battlegrounds is still fun, and Hearthstone's fun, and we got some very amazing stuff here coming in the next couple weeks, so I'm excited. WorldEight, what have you been doing in Hearthstone?
I've been doing quite a few things. In terms of constructed, I was able to get to a rank I was pretty happy with, which is top 500. Everybody's kind of got like their rank that they feel like really competitive at, and that's where my sweet spot is. Very happy with that, and also secured, I think, 11x in Wild. I'm right on the cusp, so it's we'll log in and see situation. But I think I have it, and I played quite a bit of Twist. I think the health changes, and more importantly, the deck changes are fantastic. I think they really took the first 2-3 weeks and iterated on it in a very positive way. So the field felt very somewhat balanced. I ended up actually taking King Crush through my Diamond 5 through 1. Had something like a 60% win rate or something like that. But it's just kind of a fun deck. It's big beasts, right? And that was a deck that I was fond of. And then towards the end of the game, you just keep hitting them for 8 damage every turn to the face. And they have to find a way to deal with just that. It's most decks can't. And you're sitting behind your mountain bears saying, you know, I'm just going to keep hitting you. And it's been a good week. I actually queued up one game of Battlegrounds. I haven't even queued a game of Battlegrounds since they released spells. So I don't know any of the minions. I don't know any of it. And just turbo. I just built up my tavern tier really quickly and bought all what I thought were powerful minions, and I had some fun, but obviously got completely blown away. And once I got to top 4, but it was cool seeing everything new. I mean, it's a great mode, and I understand why people play it. It's just not my usual thing.
So before we move on to me, what are your thoughts on the changes to the way ranking works as far as the MMR changes they made? You did Twist, Wild, and Standard this month. Did you notice any changes, or did everything just seem like normal for you?
So the changes were made for players outside of Legend. If you kind of go into the notes, it's anywhere from Bronze through Diamond. So I was already in Legend at that point for Standard and Wild, and Twist there's just not that many players playing it. So when I'd queue, I'd run into the same probably like 10 players trying to push Diamond, the end of the Diamond 5 grind. Like we're in the last 2-3 days here, so it's just like 10 players trying to get through it. So it's not really noticeable. From my understanding, though, it's attempting to match players more accurately once they run out of star bonuses. And so for most players that feel competitive about the game, that's somewhere in the Diamond range. We'll see next month, really, after we have a fresh start. But I think people are going to find the Diamond 5 through 1 climb particularly more of a challenge. You're going to start to feel that 50% win rate of your deck a lot more acutely. So we'll see on the, what effect it has. One of the things is supposed to really trim the bots because they have terrible MMR, right? So less bots is better for most players. But we'll have to see because we weren't in. A lot of players are already in Legend, so they didn't get an experience of it.
All right, yeah, that's fair, and I was already Legend as well. And if you didn't hear that, just a guy, you should play Crush in Twist because you can play bears, and everybody knows how much you love the bears.
Yep.
So I've talked on this show that this month my goal has been top 5,000. And by the way, WorldEight, you said 2 or 3 days. We got like maybe 9 hours or something like that until the end of the month. So it's a lot sooner than you think. So my goal is 5,000. Right now I'm about 2,600. I have been playing really well, having a lot of fun. We finished up the stream week this week. It was good to talk about that. And after, even though it's Hearthstone, I'll talk about that after Hearthstone. But I'm going to play a little bit after we finish the podcast. And if I go over 3,000, I'm stopping. If I go under 2,500 again, then if I go over 2,500 again, I'm stopping. So I'm going to make myself rank floors. And if I exceed them, I'm done. And I'm just going to take the finish. I've been very happy with how I played. It's been good. I'm not going to get 11 stars, but over the last 3 months, I've really improved my MMR. And I'm very excited about that. Yesterday, was it yesterday? 2 days ago. 2 days ago. Friday. I finally got my spicy pretzel mustard. Wasn't intentionally trying to do it, but I had George. And I got the 4/5, and then on turn 2, I took another 4/5, the demon, and then I divine shielded 1 and leveled the next turn, and from there I pivoted to dragons, and I got a good. By the end of it, I had a board of 7 divine shielded dragons with Wind Fury, so that kind of helped. So that was a lot of fun. It's one of those things. It's like I've gotten the AFK achievement, which very few people have, but a lot of people seem to have gotten the spicy pretzel mustard, and I just wanted it. I wanted it done. We got it. So very happy about that. But Doc, we missed you last week because the electricity gods weren't very kind to us. So
my man, it was so bad. So yeah, so listeners, obviously I wasn't here last week. We had some neighbors down a couple streets that were on the same part of the power grid with, they had some of there was something relatively major that broke. And so it needed to get like fixed as soon as possible. And so the power company and the PUD shut off the power to like I don't know how much of our area was affected, but we didn't have power for almost 24 hours. And it was the hottest day of the year so far. So we had like just got done hanging out with my in-laws, got home, had no power. So then love my brother, love him. But Cortland was like, okay, let's not open the fridge, whatever. And then my brother comes up, opens the fridge to grab a drink. And so then like the seal broke on the fridge. And so then we had to take everything out. And so we took everything out of the fridge and freezer, took it over to the in-laws, and then really just woke up and then went over to the in-laws again, just because our house is a brick house. And when it's 100 degrees outside and you don't have AC because the power's not working, a brick house turns into an oven very fast. So we were not at our house for a very, very long time without any power. And then it took us 2 days of throttling our AC to get our house to a temperature that we like, so that we wouldn't just freeze our AC unit, because we don't want to do that either. So it was a lot of small adjustments to get the AC back down to where we have it. But I've had power. It's been great. It's still been hot, but I'm back now.
But aside from the power, it's been 2 weeks, Doc. I know you probably have some other life outside of ladder stuff you want to talk about, or am I wrong?
I mean, my brother, he just wrapped on a movie that he was filming in Salt Lake, so he was able to come over and hang out. So I hung out with him, got to play some Magic with him, got to watch some anime with him too. Just got to hang out with him because now we live 4.5 hours away from each other, so we don't get to see each other too often anymore. So it's just always nice when he's able to come up. And the first Hollywood movie that he's worked on to be released in theaters comes out next month. It's part 2 of the Horizon saga. Part 1 came out just a couple days ago. And then part 2 comes out in the middle of August. I think it comes out in like 3 weeks. Please go see them. If you like Westerns at all, like it's just, I think it's a trilogy. It's either a trilogy or it's going to be a quadrilogy of a Western epic, starring Kevin Costner and some other really talented actors. Brother didn't have anything major. He was in the locations department, but he got to talk with Kevin Costner, got to talk with a couple of different actors, got to do stuff on locations. So just very happy for him that a project of his is finally is going to be out there, on that kind of a scale. So he'll get to put it on like his IMDb page and everything like that for his work in the industry. So very happy for him. And yeah, I think that's it this time.
WorldEight, what have you been doing outside of this wonderful game of Hearthstone?
Oh, so summer break started for my boy who's actually in school. We have 2 kids, and the other one's too little to have summer break. He just keeps going to daycare. Same every day is the same here. But for the older one, we're trying to get him involved with summer camps and just general activities. His day is a lot shorter without school. The summer camps typically only run for 4 hours, something like that, and they're interesting. We've signed him up for a variety of camps. He went to a horseback riding camp last week. He's going to the aquarium this week every day to learn about whatever they do at the aquarium. And next week he's going to a video game design boot camp. So,
oh heck yeah,
yeah. So he's only 7, but he's having the variety of summer, but that keeps me busy juggling, the fact that he needs this, more attention, right, than with school. And yeah. But we're also enjoying the summer. We spent pretty much the whole weekend in the pool at my our family has a beach house, and we didn't go to the beach at all. It was actually not great beach weather, but it was great pool weather. So we enjoyed that, and yeah, just enjoying the summer so far.
Heck yeah.
Fantastic. So after, I'm not going to say this on stream, so remind me at the end of the stream. I've been, because you said your kid's going to game design camp. I've been kind of playing around with a possible idea of maybe trying to write a game, and I have a concept. We're not going to share that yet because you know what, you guys will steal it. I know, but remind me after. We'll talk about it. So this week I finished up streaming week, and it was a lot. It was fun. I was streaming a lot, and I was playing mostly Hearthstone. I did a little bit of Hades too, but mostly Hearthstone, and look where we ended up. So I think it was successful. Congratulations to Elseworld, who won our bundle, who was actually there quite a lot of my hours. Just every time we were giving away an entry, they were there. So smart, and they won at the end. And also a special early shout out to Mountain of Cats, who also donated to the Trevor Project, and we still have the link for the Trevor Project. So if you want to donate to that, it's a great cause. So I have it on my profile. If you need it, just let me know. But amazing week, super fun. I'm probably gonna do another one in July when the family goes on vacation again. They're going to do something else, and I'm staying home with the dogs because it's a lot cheaper, and I get to have some nice quiet time. So it works out. So I'm looking forward to that. The highlight of the week, though, was Friday night. I did some arena co-op with Judge. I was into my cups. Had quite maybe a little bit to drink. It was a lot of fun, but great community interaction. And the whole goal of the whole thing was just to get a few more people into the community, and we did that. So I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to more. But enough about me. Let's start talking about the nerfs. We got some nerfs this week. Both Reno and Virus Module for Ziliax and Celestial Projectionist all went up in 1 mana. WorldEight, what are your thoughts with the nerfs?
So overall, pretty happy with the nerfs. They were meant to address basically this state of the meta we were in, which is either you have this kind of late game curve of Ankyliax, as it was referred to when you had the Virus Perfect modules paired together on 8 into Yogg or Reno on 9, and it felt like many decks couldn't get over that hump. So moving the Ziliax up 1, moving the Reno up 1 turn is a big difference. I've kind of spoken about that on the show before. It's you win the game 1 turn earlier, and it doesn't matter if they have Reno. I was actually playing against Ron Mexico, and I was on a Cycle Rogue, and it's a weird Cycle Rogue deck. I have like Crystal Coves and Drone Deconstructors, and I just try to abuse Spark Bots and stuff like that. A little bit more variety than your usual Cycle Rogue. But anyway, he had all of the greed in his hand, right? He had the Yogg, he had the Ankyliax, he had Test, and he messaged me after. He's like, he was just 1 turn off. And I was like, that's exactly what the nerfs were supposed to do to those higher end cards. A few days earlier, he would have won the game. But with 1 mana more, it's significant. And in terms of the Projectionist nerf, I'm not as big of a fan on that one, but it was meant to address basically the other side of it, which was, if you're not doing that, then you need to really have this big blowout turn 5 and end the game on 6-7 before turn 8 comes and it swings the other way. So the 1 mana nerf nudged Painlock, pretty effectively from high tier 1 to low tier 1. Still a very strong deck. Kind of put Cycle Rogue overall in a bad state because that is effectively a 2 mana nerf, since what the pattern was is that you shadow stepped it and played it for free. But I'm happy with the nerfs. Wondering when if they'll ever will change Reno to be something else. But I think at 10 it's pretty appropriate for it to be pretty game ending.
See, I'm the complete opposite. I feel like that the nerfs to Ziliax module and Reno did almost nothing, and probably because I'm in a different area of the ladder than you are. But Reno still does Reno things. It still feels crappy. It's not a good feeling. And most of the time, the control decks I've seen, they can just do whatever they were going to do on 10 on 9 and then play Reno on 10. So I haven't seen much of a difference. I've seen some people experimenting with other Ziliaxes, but I've still seen plenty of Kiliacs, and I don't think like the nerf did. I mean, yes, is it slower? Sure. Are they all worse? Yes, but I don't think they addressed the issues, because most of those times you're seeing a lot of those in the control decks, and I have seen just, and maybe it's because I'm not at that 11-star level, but it's still this. They still do the same things, and it hasn't seemed to affect it that much. Now, I think what I would like to see is something to change with Reno. I've had plenty of ideas for that, but I think with the virus module, I think you got to either take Reborn off of it, and move it to a different module, maybe, or take Divine Shield off of it. And I think if you take Divine Shield off of it, that becomes interesting, because now you have a minion that clears 2 other things, because if it kills something and dies, you get another Reborn, and kills something and dies. You can't do that with the Divine Shield, so I think it becomes a different thing. And I have been more than okay with the change to Celestial Projectionist, because, like you said, it's made Painlock a little bit worse. Not worse, it's still tier 1. Made a little bit worse. And when you see the cards coming for Painlock, Painlock had to change. And my theory was, I think that they wanted to change Celestial Projectionist, not only because of the non-game states you get out of Pain Rogue and Cycle Rogue. I'm sorry, Painlock and Cycle Rogue, but I bet you there's some other things that they're worried about in the upcoming set, and I think this was like a pre-nerf for that. I could be wrong, but that was kind of the feeling I'm getting from that. So I kind of feel the opposite of what you said, and that's okay. But, I'm still seeing, it seems like people went away from Reno for a little bit, maybe like a couple hours, but then he was just back as normal, and let's go. Doc, I don't think you've been playing a whole lot of standard, so I don't think the nerfs have affected you at all, right?
Yeah, no, but I mean, I still know how it feels to be playing a mid-range to aggro deck, right? And then have Reno drop, and then your game is just done at that point, because you take all the work you've done is gone, and then you have to take a turn off, and then try to play catch up. And with specifically aggro, that's really hard. Mid range could maybe do it sometimes, but yeah, I mean, it's a powerful effect, right? So it's all like whenever it does the thing, it's going to feel bad. But I think bumping it to 10, other than changing the card in its functionality, is the absolute best that they can do, right? So props on Team 5 for hitting this one, because it's been a problem card for quite a while now. So,
and I predict that both those cards are going to get reworked before the end of the year. I think they're just going to continue. What they like to do is they don't want to see cards from previous sets really kind of prevent cards from current sets to shine and to be relevant, and cards like Kiliacs and Reno kind of do that. So I don't know. I think we'll see some changes. Anyway, so normally this is backwards day. So normally what we do is we talk about something like, hey, it's the new set, so we'll talk about the new cards, and then we'll have whatever our main topic is, which is, whatever it could be. But if you've ever listened to Coin Concede, which if you're listening to us, I'm sure you've probably at least heard an episode of Coin Concede, probably for the last, year and a half. Like, if they haven't mentioned WorldEight decks about 15 times, it's a slow episode of Coin Concede. And we're gonna have WorldEight on frequently, and to talk about deck building and stuff like that. But I know when you listen to podcasts right now during this cycle, every 4 months, they tell you about what cards are good and what cards they think are bad and what cards they're worried about, and what card, not just Coin Concede, all of them. So they go through the cycle. So I thought we'd do something a little different. And I thought we would talk about how to evaluate the cards. So that way, when we're reviewing the cards, you have this in your mind, and we're not just relying on the smart people to tell us why a card is good or bad. We can do that kind of work ourselves. And so I thought it was a different approach. So I initially wrote up a guide here. Not a guide, but like our kind of bullet points. And I talked a little bit about the vanilla test, and I'm sure you guys have all heard about the vanilla test. And I put some work into this. This took probably 15 minutes to get all put up. And then WorldEight's like, I hate the vanilla test. So WorldEight, why do you hate the vanilla test?
I just think it's fairly outdated. So just for context, the vanilla test is saying if I'm paying this much for a card, what's my stat line? What are my keywords? What am I getting out of it? And that's why it's vanilla, right? Like we're not evaluating the card on some abstract effect that we've never seen before. It's I put this to Tito when I was in this, we were talking before the show. I said, well, if you do this vanilla test, then a card like Careless Mechanic, which is 3 mana for 4/5, and in a lot of decks, no downside, that looks like an absolutely nutty card, and it doesn't see play. And for the also Brass Elemental, it's 3/3 and it's got all the keywords, right? Like, it does everything, but you don't see that card either, because first of all, vanilla cards kind of boring. People aren't really gonna, they'll put them in when it's necessary. But I think Hearthstone has moved past just stat lines, right? Like, we are more interested in like what are the overall powerful effects that we're doing, and how do we support those powerful effects. So we could still, I think it's still fair to say, well, this card Bran is, basically it's this 2/4 for 8 mana, right? Like, what is this card doing? But it doesn't really capture any of the scope of what the card actually does. Although sometimes we will see, in my opinion, some notable like vanilla stat line impacts. I think like 3 health is a big one, in my opinion, because there's a lot of clears and things that deal 3 damage. But aside from that, generally, I'm not a big fan of the vanilla stat test.
Yeah, I think the vanilla stat test is exactly what it is. It just says, is this something that is fair? And fair, a lot of the cards you even mentioned, they're fair cards. But fair doesn't do anything right now. Fair. If you're doing fair things all the time, you're not going to win a whole lot of Hearthstone games. And that's where kind of I think it's still a good thing, but it's like, this is like the baseline. So if a card is fair and it has an exceptional ability or something that you evaluate onto it, I think that becomes that's probably even a more powerful card potentially than something that is vanilla but also has kind of a sub ability. And it's not. It's an old, like you said, it's an old antiquated system, but it is good to kind of like, well, is this something if I draw it from a discover, is it going to be fine to play or something along those lines? And I think that's kind of where we end up with the vanilla test. But anyway, that's kind of what the vanilla test is, just kind of like a early evaluation. And again, obviously Bogorfist Ogre passes the vanilla test with flying colors. It is perfect minion for its stats, but it doesn't do anything aside from look really handsome. So let's talk a little bit about when you're looking at a card. So we're now, I think we have 4.5 class reveals so far. When you're looking at a card, what are you looking at to when you see it?
Well, when I take a look at a card, I think, like most players, I have an initial reaction to it. And oftentimes I'll go back to the initial reaction, and I think that the team really wants to have a wow for, like, wow, look at this legendary. Wouldn't it be so cool to play with this? And that might bias opinions later, but I think it's fun, right? This is a fun time of Hearthstone where we don't know what things are going to actually be playable, what the potential could be for any of these cards. So it's fun kind of just to let our imaginations run wild. Despite building many decks, I actually don't really theory craft many decks because it just makes this whole month feel really long. I'll take a look at the cards and I'll be like, I'll revisit those in like 2 to 3 weeks when, there's only a week left that I have to feel like I'm waiting for the next thing. But in terms of after the initial impressions, I tried to say, does this card fit into a few categories that I have mentally over the years kind of formed? The first one is, does this card define an expansion? Like, is this like one of the cards that we're going to remember this expansion by? The most recent one being Ziliax. I think a lot of players are going to associate, the last expansion with Ziliax, and just know that this was one of the cards that came out of Whizbang. It's everywhere. Another card that was like that was Astalor, right? And so you remember there's very memorable cards, and they'll often be in as many decks as they can get into. Often they have just powerful effects, or their stat line, like what they or their stat line is just crazy good, and but mostly it's really powerful effects that may not be unique. Like Astalor wasn't actually that unique in terms of some of the effects that it did, but it was just so good. And so that's kind of the first thing. I'm not sure if we got the pre-release card Marin, if it's quite there at defining any expansion, but it's pretty good. I would say that's probably borderline. I'm not going to go too much into specifics here. The next kind of
I'm going to say that what you're saying, it's not just the powerful cards either. Well, not just the overtly powerful cards like the Marins and the Astalars or whatnot, like Snake Salesman.
Yeah, that definitely defined an expansion, and it doesn't have to be a legendary, like you said. When I'm building decks, I build a lot of decks that are aggressive in nature, and 1-drops are important. Looking at an expansion's 1-drops, Salesman is just this. I mean, before it was even nerfed, it was just an outstanding card. It went into every deck that wanted to have any kind of early game. So yeah, I mean that card defined an expansion. It was an all-star. Still mostly is. The next kind of category of cards that I look at are what are like the main players of the expansion. So something like Titans, Colossals. These are the obvious main players for an expansion, but you have also some cards like Sif, which just create entire archetypes. So the main players for expansion, I typically say like their power level is very, very high, but usually they wouldn't go in every deck, maybe just because they're so class specific, or they would go just in a slower deck, but they're still very good. But you do know those cards exist. Like if you mention that card to another player, they'd be like, "Oh, you drew your Sif. Oh boy," that game really turned. Like drawing that card basically defined that game of Hearthstone. After that, or not drawing it, right? When she's hiding out in the bottom of your deck and you don't have Dredge. And then the next category I tend to put cards in, like what's the supporting cast? Just while on the topic of Mage, Inquisitive Creation was a terrific kind of complement to Sif. More so before the nerf, the mana nerf, but it enabled the deck to exist. Without that board clear, the deck would have, relied more on star power, but might not have been able to even exist for the few months that it was extremely competitive. There's a lot of the supporting cast. The list goes very long, but there's still kind of, you mentioned this to another player and that they would probably identify that and be like, oh yeah, I put Down with the Ship in my deck, and that like everybody kind of knows what that effect does, and it's a good card, and you're trying to support another card, Helia in this case, with that card. And then the last category I tend to put cards in are pack filler kind of cards. They fulfilled some kind of design goal that the team had for the expansion. A lot of times flavor goes into these cards, and they can be really fun cards too, but they're just generally not competitive. The power level isn't there. They're more likely they're too fair for what they do. And
so
those
like
are
the
kind of
wind-up cards.
Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of examples of these kind of or like secondary, themes. So the wind-up cards, the caravan, the soloists. There's a pretty long list of secondary themes that didn't pan out. In this case, we'll see. I believe that the drinks are the secondary concern here, and I think they'll be pretty good. But won't get into that right now. But yeah, a lot of cards will end up. 80% of the cards will end up as pack filler.
So, and there's also some cards. There was also I look at things a little bit the same, but I look at a card and I say, all right, does this card instantly go into any current archetype? Or is this card part of a package that, and they've really done a lot less packaging than they used to. There are some exceptions in this set. We'll talk about those later. But like a lot of times, like you had like, hey, here's Relic Vault, here's Zymox, here are the relics, and that was an entire package. And those can be fun, and those can be interesting, and those obviously define their own archetype. But a lot of times, like, so you look at a card and say, does this go in any of the decks I'm currently playing or people are currently playing, whether it's a tier 1 deck, or maybe it's a card that you say, oh, I can finally play that tier 3 deck because now I have support. Like there are decks right now, and we'll talk about this in a little bit too, but like people want to play Big Spell Mage again. We have Millhouse, we have the 9 mana do 10 damage and draw summon a 10 mana card or whatever it is, Sunset Volley. And we have some big spells, but there's not enough support for it. So every time we get a mini set or a set, people are like, oh, do we have the tools now? And I think that's always an interesting part. Is like, can I finally get this old deck to go and get better, or is this going to just improve a deck that I'm already playing? And then there's decks, then there's cards that possibly define their own archetypes because they're brand new, they have a different effect, and maybe they have some support around them where you're like, okay, I'm gonna build something. This is where I'm gonna start, or this is a shell that I can put into something else, something like that, and it's their own thing. And then you have completely build around cards, and I put an example of Wheel of Death. Wheel of Death defined its own archetype, and whether it was good or not doesn't matter. It was good for a while, and then they changed a bunch of things that made it bad. But apparently it's still made a recovery just recently. But that's like one of those cards where it's like, okay, this is so unique and different. Like if I'm going to play it, I have to build my deck around it. And I love when they have cards like that, honestly. So, yeah, I mean, generally they have, cards that can make a deck better, make a deck, and this doesn't even change. Like you could have a card that makes an archetype better, but it's so hard to evaluate because even if that deck got better, there could be other decks that keep it down that got better, or that become relevant that will make it so that way, oh yeah, the deck got better in theory, but it's actually still not good because there's other things kind of beating it down and making it impossible to play or hard to play. And sometimes you get cards that don't even have you're like, I love this card, but I have nowhere to put it. Like it doesn't fit anywhere yet. This happens more, I think, in the mini set than the main sets. But you look at a card and you're like, oh, I would love to play this, but where? And it just doesn't. It's like you got to remember it for when new cards come out because like, oh, I finally get to play that card. But yeah. So WorldEight, you got any final thoughts on evaluating cards before we actually evaluate some cards?
I think what you said is absolutely terrific and spot on. I think there's, it's very easy to take a card and say, will this fit into an existing deck? Will it improve the deck? That's a very easy way to assess a card. It's much, much more difficult to say, is this going to save a tier 3 deck, right? But sometimes it can, and that's that's occasionally where you'll find the gems, where often I'll see potential for a card that is overlooked, and I think that's fun, and it's usually worth exploring. And if not, have some fun with the home brews every now and then. At the first week of an expansion is a great time for that. But
and this is how you find this is how you find a true deck builder, because you'll see so there was a card that came out in the mini set for last expansion. And no, I forget if it was last expansion or expansion before, but it was a treant card where it was if you for every treant on the board, you drew a card and you summoned a treant. And most people looked at it and was like, okay, fine, whatever. And then the deck builder, like WorldEight, was like, I cannot wait to play this card. So when that's how you find the true deck builders out there, when they harp on cards that you were like, wait, what? That was a card that was released? I didn't even notice it.
Yeah, but like I said, your points are great. I think also we still get packages, and sometimes it could be a little hard to assess the power level of the package overall. But what we have been seeing is that if the power level of a package is very low and they want to push it, they will buff typically the whole package. We saw that with Spell Mage, right? They buffed it a little bit, and because they thought it was fun. And so even if we take a new expansion and we're like, I want to play this archetype that they, seem to be pushing, and it doesn't work out, sometimes they'll give it a nudge along the way a little bit later, so we shouldn't be too discouraged.
And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the package they put out, they don't want it to be overpowering, so they started off in a certain area and then they start buffing the package. Like Rifts did that. Rifts got to a point they were playable. They weren't playable at first. And same thing with Relics. I don't think anybody remembers, like, Relics were a staple for a long time, but they weren't good at the beginning. They took a couple nudges before they got to a place where they even playable. Once they got to that level, it was great. So, and then the opposite too is like, how many times did they nerf spirits in Hunter? It seemed like every patch was like, oh, let's nerf a spirit.
I think spirits ate 5 nerfs. It was a lot. It was a lot of nerfs. But the original spirits, it was crazy. You rolled this 5/4 stag. So I give you a 4/2 weapon. That thing was insane.
Yep, pretty good.
I'm pretty sure you could disenchant just about any spirit card for full value for about 6 months.
Definitely felt that way.
Well, Doc, do you have any thoughts on evaluating cards before we move on to actually evaluating some cards?
Yeah. So for me personally, I just look to see if there's something fun I think I can do with it, or if it like fits how I play Hearthstone. And if it does, then I will try to find a home for it in something. I'll try it. Yeah. But is it going to be good 100% of the time? Absolutely not. 50% of the time? Probably not. But like sometimes it's fun playing a list that is just slightly off like the meta list, and it's a little janky in your own flavorful way. Because I've done that with some stuff in expansions past, and I've had so much enjoyment with those. So I personally, as Doc McButt, just look for, do I think I can have fun with this card? Like if it's powerful, that's awesome, right? That's always a bonus. But if I can put it into something that will make it more enjoyable for me, then I'm happy with it.
The worst place a card can be is you're excited about it and it's just almost there. It's like that close. Like for me, it was like Kangor, it was Eartherns. Like, did they do okay? Yeah, I mean they were fine. They were cool. I've had a ton of fun playing Earthen decks. I've had a ton of fun playing Kangor decks, but they were just like that close to being like really exceptional. And like you get to the mini set and you're like, are you gonna give me support? Are you gonna give me like a 2-mana Earthen card or something? And they just don't. And you're like, come on. How about you, WorldEight? Is there any cards that were like, you really want to be good and it's just almost there and you keep trying to make it work? Black Rock and Roll. You keep trying to make it work.
Surely this time it'll be Black Rock and Roll's time. There's a lot of cards that I still play around with. I have a Cattle Rustler into Cagehead Death Growl deck that I really enjoy, but it's not competitive. Hagatha into Wish Upon the Star seems really good, right? But it just hasn't clicked. And so there's a lot of decks like that where what I'm doing is I'm trying to say, okay, this card has a really powerful effect. What can we do with it? And often that effect is fun, or ideally fun. And but that definitely draws my attention the most. is, what can we do with this card that is unusual and potentially, does something that designers didn't intend for it to do. Something like the Earthen are very good, but they're very fair. And they basically performed as I think the developers wanted them to. Something like Umpire's Grasp into Shopper was something I don't think they saw, and that was an opportunity for someone to say, oh, wow, this is a really powerful thing that was not on the design team's radar. So in that particular case, that Shopper isn't that exciting, but I'm looking for things that potentially will make it an unfair game. Mana cheat is a big one. Tutoring is another big one. So yeah, looking for typically trying to find the powerful cards first and then filtering down to see what supports those cards.
I also wonder if the developers ever say, all right, we're going to put these two things that look like they're going to go together really well, and we're going to frustrate the heck out of people because they just can't make it work. Like, hey, here's Cage Head and Death Growl. Have fun. And I'll tell you, like those are the kinds of things that I chase, and that's why I have taken so long to get better at the game, is because there's no better feeling than playing a Puppeteer, a mini next to another minion, double Death Growl, let's go. And it's almost there most of the time. It's like those are the decks I always fall in love with, and the decks that are just like almost there, and you can feel it in your heart that you're like, it just needs one more thing. It just needs something, and you just want it to happen. Well, let's actually talk about before we get to the actual cards, and we're not going to go through every card. We don't have time for that, and I don't have the patience for that. We're not going to do a 5-hour bread and butter. What are your thoughts on Tourist?
Well, if you're asking me, I think it's a great concept. I am a big fan of the dual class cards in general, and I think the Tourists allow the decks to basically have a larger pool of cards for this expansion. You're doubling the number of cards that you get out of this expansion. Instead of 10, you're looking at 10 plus 10. It's in terms of class cards. And so I think it's a kind of an elegant solution to being like, well, instead of doing, 4 class cards and 6 dual class cards, we're still going to have these dedicated class cards. But if you're willing to pay the price, the deck building price, then you can have access to the other cards. And so far, what we've seen from the Tourists, they're good cards. So it's not the pain of putting Baku in your deck.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is not getting Baku. Most of the Tourists we've seen have been really good cards.
Yeah, I think they're still little. They're mostly, I would say, 1 mana more than you would probably want to see them at. But I'm not going to go into it too much. But I think the Tourist idea was an elegant design choice, and I'm excited for it.
And I think it makes a lot of sense too, in the way that, can you imagine if we could just play any Tourist, or you could Tourist to any class, the balanced nightmare that would be? Because day one, someone will figure out the stupid combo that kills you on turn 3, and then it's miserable for the first week. So yeah, I like the way they do that. But now it becomes kind of like when we had the mini set where we had the Druid Priest dual class, where they nerfed all the cards before Priest really found a home for him, because they were just too good in Druid. So I think it's interesting, and I'm kind of excited to see what kind of people come up with. But it's like adding another 12 cards to each class, more or less. So I like it. So let's go ahead and start with the Warlock cards. So far we've only seen 6 Warlord cards. Warlock cards. And also, before we go, thank you to Ben Hearthstone, however you want to say his name. Everyone's a big fan of him. And Ben, if you're listening, we still want to have you on the show. People have asked for you to come on the show. Please come. Let us talk to you. But we're using the images he puts together for the community. So like any other podcast, we do this. so far we've seen 6 Death Knight, Warlock cards, and I have to say I'm not excited for any of these. Not saying they're not good cards, but I'm already sick of Painlock, and these all support Painlock.
I don't know if they all support Painlock, but they are very good Painlock cards. Or if I'm looking at Wild Quest Warlock cards, especially the Legendary, that will, if you've taken 8 damage on your turns, summon an 8/8 with taunt. That seems it's going to slot right in. It's a very powerful card and have an impact immediately. But also, we also have the common.
What about the 8? No. Before we move on, let's talk about Oribos, the World Serpent.
Sure.
What does he say about him? Like, so yeah, you summon an 8/8 with taunt, but what is this 8/8 with taunt? What is that passes the vanilla test, obviously, but what else is what is the text on this card? It's kind of gross.
Right. So it gives a death rattle. Give a minion in your hand. Death rattle. Summon Oribos. If you've played, so one of the cards in Standard that you can play with right now is was it Greybeard?
Greybow?
Yeah, Greybow, right. You're barking up the wrong tree. Great card. Love that card. It's so annoying to get rid of that card. This is going to be even worse. I mean, it's 8/8. That thing is huge.
Yeah, well, at least Greybow, you could plan around it and eliminate all the other minions, because their death rattle, it would go to another minion that would summon Greybow on the board. So if you cleared all their minions, then you clear Greybow, and then you're fine. So you had a plan of attack there if you wanted to make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah,
you could try the Dirty Rat.
Yeah, but it's a death rattle, so it's not a battle cry. I mean,
I meant you could try the Dirty Rat so they don't have any minions in their hand, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah. But in terms of overall Warlock cards, right, we do have several Painlock cards. One of the questions that comes up, though, is it an upgrade? Are these cards upgrades to what we're already using? I think the Party Planner Legendary is it's a slam dunk for that deck. But you look at something like the Flame Juggler, which is gain stats equal to the damage you've taken on this turn. Seems pretty good, but we never played the basically the 2-mana version of the Naga in Demon Hunter, which Snakebite, right? We never played that card. So, sometimes it looks like it's going to fit right into a deck, but it's not actually good enough, really, even for the current deck.
But it also can fit into it. So I agree with you 100%. Like, that card, if you look at Painlock as it is now, maybe it probably doesn't slot in there. But depending on how the meta shakes out, it doesn't mean that Painlock might not evolve. And maybe Painlock doesn't become as what it was, where it's like this super aggressive, we're going to have all these giants on turn 8, on turn 4, deal with it. Maybe because of how the meta shapes up, maybe a slightly slower Painlock could be something. And the original Painlock, maybe it's not doing as well. People like you make adjustments to it and say, oh, I'm going to try this. And all of a sudden now we have a mid-range Painlock. Maybe, so like it may not slot into the Painlock as is now, but I wouldn't rule it necessarily out.
Well, these cards in particular look more Flame Imp than Molten Giant, right? The curve of Party Fiend, where you get 3 damage for 1 mana, 3 damage to your hero. It's very much like a Flame Imp. And then you follow that up with Cursed Souvenir on the next turn, which is 3 more damage, deal 3 damage to your hero, right? Like, these are kind of Flame Imp cards, in my opinion, which could lead to some wide boards in addition to all the other things you're doing, where you might start seeing the kind of ticking Ziliacs in these decks. It's more of a swarm the board type Painlock. So you're absolutely right. It could look different than before.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, even if a card, hopefully we haven't lost WorldEight. Oh, there he is. Even if a card looks like you're like, it's probably too slow for this deck, it might be okay. It just might be okay differently. That deck could evolve. I All right, so Doc, you have any thoughts on the Warlock cards before we move on to Rogue?
I'm excited to see Big World Serpent. I don't know. I think it's a fun. I think it'll be good and it'll be fun. It's been a minute since I've seen like a big serpenty minion that I've liked, because I like dinosaurs, like dragons, worms, all that kind of stuff. But Oribos the World Serpent, as I've said before, I'm a big art guy as far as Hearthstone cards are concerned. And I really do enjoy the scale of Oribos the World Serpent in its card art. So,
well, you might also be
it'll be fun to play it.
We might be getting, some kind of big Death Knight support. We don't know, right? Because Warlock is tourist onto Death Knight, so maybe there'll be something big in Death Knight.
And they tend to release the cards in kind of the ones that go together. So we've seen only half of the Warlock cards. So the other half could be a completely different archetype or completely different package. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, we have the Bonfire card, 4 damage, cheat out your next Death Rattle minion. So that's a way to cheat out your Cage Head, right?
Fair enough. And just a reminder for the Taurus cards, it's only Taurus cards for this particular set. So it's not like you're going to be able to take Cage Head and put that into Warlock. It's going to be only the cards from this set that you can add. And the one thing about Painlock is I'm tired of Painlock because I've seen enough of it, and I can't tell you how many times on turn 3 I'm like, I win this game if they don't have Infernal. I win this game if they don't have Infernal. I win this game if they don't have Infernal, and they always have Infernal. Just like they always have either Grasp on 3 or the Minion on 4. It just always happens. But anyway, let's move on to Rogue. WorldEight, what are your thoughts on the Rogue set so far? And we have all the cards, right? So what are your thoughts on the Rogue set?
Right. So we have the 10 cards for Rogue, and Rogue is touring Warlock. I don't see a lot of potential with the Painlock cards for Rogue, but there seems to be a big push for the Burgle archetype, which is, play cards from another class. I'm not particularly motivated to play these Warlock cards, but something like the Party Fiend is 1 mana, activate Velorok, for example, right off the bat, pretty easy. Hard to say if this is going to be enough to push Burgle, except for Snatch and Grab. That card really stands out to me as really powerful. Anytime that something can go to 0, which this could very quickly go to 0, always strikes me as something really good. Another card that is going to be, I think, really powerful is Maestra, because most of the hero cards from the past are pretty powerful, if not grindy. But then if you play Test later in the game, your hero, if it's a different class, will replay all of your rogue cards. So it'll lead to some interesting game states, and Thief Rogue is already kind of the control rogue, if you will, and this would push that even further.
Fair enough. I look at Knickknack's Shack, and I don't know if you say anything about this because I did have to step away for a quick second. I look at Knickknack Shack and I like, are we gonna get a Miracle Rogue at some point? Because that feels like such a miracle card. Which is draw a card if you play it this turn, reopen this. I just feels like that's such fodder for. That's what was the one where if you played a combo card, you drew 2 cards or whatever. The I forget the name of it. It feels like an enabler card for something like that.
So Swindle is potentially the card you're thinking of, which is 2 mana combo, draw a minion and a spell, and by itself it's just draw a minion.
It was a minion. It was a every time you played a combo card or something like that. It was a build around card. It was like a 2 mana, 3 mana build around card. I mean, there was
this location reminds me of Gadgetzan Auctioneer, right?
Yeah, a little limited there, but yeah,
could be very powerful. 3 mana for drawing 4 is pretty good on its own. With the potential for more. There also seems to be this sub theme of coins. So I know a lot of people have been pushing have tried really hard for a Wishing Well. So Wishing Well plus Sonya is pretty good. If you just have to, this might be one of those cases where we see the critical mass come together for that deck with 2 more add a coin cards. That might be enough.
I don't know. I mean, Pilot had his Wishing Well Rogue banned this week in the Coin Conceit Listener Series in the top 8 because he's been playing it really well. Now, did you win this week or not? I haven't asked yet. I apologize.
I am playing after this podcast, so we'll see.
Let's go.
Hey, your top deck's
If you
elite.
play Pilot, I recommend you. Yeah, everybody in that top 8 is great. Like, I think you're playing Glacier, right?
Yeah, and Glacier was the winner of the last listener series. We were in the finals together, and he took it. So we'll see how it goes tonight. If it's a revenge or just continued dominance.
Fair enough. And I think that I think Snatch and Grab is going to be a card that we hate real fast. It's an 8 mana. Destroy 2 random enemy minions. That sounds really bad for the cost. That fails the spell vanilla test. However, it costs 1 less for each card you have played from another class, and that's really easy to do at Rogue. So, I know one thing I used to hate, because you know me, I'm not a Pally main, but I like to play it a lot. I love big and tall minions, and when the Rogue's concoctions used to always get that destroy a random enemy minion, I hated that. I feel like this is just going to be the same thing.
Well, good news for you. You could play all of these cards in Paladin.
Interesting. Yeah, so I can actually get some different now I don't think you can discover a Galakron, right? You can't there are certain limitations to the Maestra discover a hero card from the past. I don't think they let you have the Galakron ones, but they have some other ones.
I don't know about any restrictions there, but I mean, you can discover Carriol, right? Even if you want, if you're lucky. But there's a lot of good hero cards from Stormwind.
So that's interesting. I don't think you can summon Carriol, and I could be wrong because this says if I play this card in Paladin, Warlock Tourist, Battlecry, discover a hero card from the past from another class. I can't discover Carriol as a Paladin because that's not another class, but I can discover it as Rogue.
Okay. All right. Well, you could still get Tavish. Tavish is pretty good.
That's fair. All right. So, anybody have any final thoughts on the Rogue cards before we move on to the Paladin cards?
Just to echo cost reduction, Hearthstone has always come into the fun time of when cost reduction exists and gets to 0. More often than not, it's an unhealthy play pattern. So hopefully they know what buttons to push on this if Snatch and Grab gets too oppressive, just because things that cost 0 have just always been good. And I'm fairly positive this is probably on their radar of cards to look at the stats very closely of internally. So okay. So this is the question then. I probably should have known this. If I'm playing Paladin and I'm a tourist to Rogue, do all my Paladin cards count for Snatch and Grab?
I believe so, yes.
Well, that seems good.
Yeah, that seems very good. And I think we're going to see a lot of those kind of synergies for the tourists. I think they've done that on purpose. And that's what's going to be the interesting thing, right? How many cards are going to get nerfed because of the tourist card and not by the fact that they get played in the class they were originally intended for? All right, so let's look at Paladin. I haven't actually looked at Paladin too closely. I didn't want to. I wanted to get so I was busy during when they were released, and I kind of avoided all the chatter because I wanted to wait to see kind of like how they were all at once. So this is like my first time really looking at all of them. Obviously, I think the piece de resistance is Sandcastle, which is basically Sandcastle, and I'm assuming it comes in as the minion first, right?
Yeah, it'll come in as the minion first. It's like Remornia.
All right, so this is 5 mana 3/8 rush. After this attacks turn into a location, and the location is a 5 mana 8 durability, but it'll probably have 7 durability after you've rushed into something or whatever it might be, 6, 5, 4, whatever. But it says give a friendly minion +3 attack and rush, turn back into a minion. Now, this one doesn't have an open. I think if I understand correctly, if you play Sandcastle, you run into a minion, it turns into a location, use the power, you can then rush back into something that turns into location, but I don't think you can use the location again that turn.
No, it would be closed.
All right, there's no way to reopen this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too dissimilar from Remornia, where you'd only have one weapon attack, even though, Remornia might dance back and forth between your weapon slot, depending on how the turn went.
Yeah. No, but, I mean, the Pally cards all look pretty interesting. Volley Maul, great flavor. After your hero attacks, get a 1-cost sunscreen that gives +1/+2. Goes well with the Sun Sapper Lanessa legendary, which is the Rogue Tourist, but your spells that cost 2 or less cast twice. So now your sunscreens that you get off the Volley Maul are now +2/+4 for 1 mana. And your other minion, so I'm sure that when you play, Holy Glowstick, that'll be a 1 mana card when you play it. So there's a lot of good value there. I think it's going to be an interesting set. The 10 mana card, Sea Shanty. Summon 3 5/5 pirates. Cost 1 less for each spell you have cast on characters this game. That feels very roguey. So it's kind of interesting that when you got a rogue tourist, and we almost got a rogue card ourselves right in there. So I think there's a lot of potential here to be fun. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the Paladin set's pretty solid here. There's this emphasis on sunscreen. What the design is that you get a whole bunch of sunscreen and you put it on your service ace to quickly discount your sea shanty, right? And ideally you double that with those effects with Sun Sapper. The fact that it's a 1/2 for 1 mana reminds me a lot of Serpent Wing. I'm a big fan of Naga Priest. That had a lot of flexibility, right? And that made it very difficult for opponents to kind of catch up with your board in terms of, looking at this from a more creative perspective. Again, going to Rogue and talking about Knick-Knack Shack, you play Knick-Knack Shack and Paladin, and that's draw 4, and you might be playing a whole bunch of cheap stuff that you're just pulling off the top of your deck. So that seems like a pretty good, draw engine for kind of a deck, like a low to the ground aggro deck that might not, usually have something like that. And I think, obviously Sandcastle is the standout here, the build around. One of the points is that if you buff this, like hand buffing, for example, the location also scales with the power. And that is really scary because that essentially gives Sandcastle rush and charge, much like Remornia. So, you could pretty easily buff this to 5-6 attack, and you're adding another really powerful charge minion to your deck. On the other hand, Castle Kennels didn't see a lot of play, which would be kind of a similar effect to compare it to. But I do think it's a very powerful card, and we'll see a lot of it.
The give a friendly minion +3 attack doesn't scale with their attack, does it?
It does. Yeah, so if Sandcastle, let's say that you've swung 3 times with your Painter's Virtue, and now it's a 6/11. You rush it into something, you kill it. It's now going to be 6. It'll be 6 +6 attack to any minion on the location. So that's pretty good damage from hand there.
Oh, this is Sandcastle into Taylor, into the location, into Swashbuckler, not Swashbuckler, South Sea Deckhand to buff that to go face. This is, yeah, no, we're so actually I want to back it up to Rogue real quick because we kind of skipped over this, and I meant to do this. When you're looking at this set, are you looking and saying we're enhancing existing archetypes, or do you feel like we're building new archetypes? Start with Rogue first.
With Rogue, I think again we might see Witching Wall Rogue completely just actually be enabled for the first time with 2 more coin cards. In terms of completely new classes or other new things, they want you to burgle. That's pretty obvious. There may be something subtle here with the Sword Shiner. That looks like an innocent card, but that adds a lot to an early game, especially since it's a pirate, right? Like, we have to look at the fact that we got 4 pirates here that all seem, even though they have the swashbuckler effect to them, adding pirates allows us to play something like Treasure Distributor, and in particular, the Sword Shiner, would fit into a very aggressive pirate deck. So really 3 kind of things here going for me with Rogue, the burgle, but also the coins, and then also pirates, right? So a lot of options here.
And it's interesting they set the Sword Shiner to be set the durability and your weapon attack and weapon to 3, rather than give it +3/+3, because then if you could have breakdanced and shadow stepped and all that, which rogues like to do, you can't take kind of advantage of shenanigans like that. So,
well, I mean, if you go quick pick on 2, swing, and then you play this, that's a pretty good curve.
Oh, it's a good curve. It's just not. My initial thought was looking at it, I'm like, does Pocket Train start out with this before he plays a bunch of Sonias and gifts and deadly poisons and all that? But probably not. It doesn't have that same kind of
repeatability. That would not be played in that deck.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at the just before we move on to the next set. What do you think about the Paladin set? As far as, are you looking at? So I'm looking at, like, I can already see a couple of these cards slotting into buff Paladin, but it also feels like there's also kind of the, like you said, the sunscreen, kind of almost aggro-ish Paladin kind of going on like that. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think I did not express how powerful Sea Shanty is. That's a lot of stats for potentially 0 mana, right? And, you could have the possibility of Sunsapper on 5 into a 0 mana Sea Shanty. That could happen, right? That seems really good. And a lot of that is going to be enabled by the sunscreens here. So I think in particular, Sea Shanty is a build around card. Grill Master, we haven't even touched on. Order in the Court, kind of effect here. Very, very powerful for a control deck to know what's coming up, along with Lifeguard. Lifeguard is so much health. And then this on top of it, the Lifesteal effect into Prismatic Beam, something like that. Both of those cards could enable a slower Paladin archetype. So a lot of possibilities here. Very flexible set. Not obvious right away what we want to do. I think there's also been this, forget the name of the Gigantify. It was the 3/3
Holy Glow Stick?
Glowbot, I think it is.
Glowbot, yeah, the Glowbot.
Yeah, that gets discounted by Holy Spells, and now we have 2 pretty solid Holy Spells here, particularly the Brew. We'll count 3 times for that, and then your bot is 0 mana just off of a single Brew. So that seems significant.
Sunscreen's not holy, right?
No, the sunscreens aren't holy, but, the aura is. So that, that's one more tick towards that kind of holy synergy.
But keep in mind, too, with Grill Master, Battlecry, draw your lowest card, Death Rattle, draw your highest card. That is what it costs in the deck, I believe. So I believe even if Sea Shanty costs 0 at the time, the Death Rattle would still draw it.
Yeah, that's correct. So that is very similar to how we used to play Order in the Court into Garden's Grace. You'll have that same thing there where you're going to have Sea Shanty in the deck, or Beam maybe, and Grill. You're playing Grill Master basically to tutor the Sea Shanty.
That is gross. That I am very much looking forward to that.
Right. So yeah, I mean, also Grill Master can tutor your Aura or Brew, which enable you to discount the Shanty at the same time.
Yep. No. We're very much excited about where Paladin is going right here. Pilot said you're gonna like the Paladin set, and I think I agree. All right. So let's go ahead and look at our last set for the day, which is Mage. What are our thoughts on Mage?
I mean, Big Spell Mage, always been a favorite, I think, for a lot of players. Tsunami is that is a build around card, right? And your supporting cast of King Tide and Surflipod will get you there to get your Tsunamis online, your Sunset Volleys online, your Orbs online. So I could very easily see, that deck coming together. Those are really powerful cards. Every time I see one water elemental, I'm like, how am I gonna get rid of this thing? And three of them that are, attacking the turn they come into play is just, it's the whole board's gonna be frozen forever. And that can happen as early as turn 5 off of King Tide. And so, again, could potentially see a slower mage deck here that tops off at Orb. And not sure how it kills you, but Orb casting Tsunami into Sunset Volley seems like a good way to end the game.
Fair enough. And listener, I know we're not reading off the cards. We'd be here forever if we read off every card. So if I'd love some feedback though, if you like, hey, please read the cards, let us know, because we're assuming that you're kind of, if you're listening to a podcast about Hearthstone, we're assuming that maybe you're keeping up with things in the what's being released. But if not, and you're like, no, I really need to know what these cards are, let us know, and we'll make sure that next time we kind of go through them, especially over the next couple weeks, but you can email us or whatnot. So what I want to know is, okay, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. One, we talked about the Big Spell Mage. Is Millhouse going to factor in here? And 2, outside of the Big Spell Mage, how do we feel about it? Looks like we're also giving some support for the existing no minion mage. So how do you think about that?
I mean, you could try Millhouse. I don't see it being the worst thing in the world, but most of the games it would not get played. In terms of a just spell mage support, talking about Tsunami, summoning 3 water elementals, what your ideal curve is manufacturing error into this. So on turn 6, you have your Tsunami, which is still very early in the game. And then ideally you replay it with Orb. Because that'll, all those water elements, Orb plays everything in the mana cost order. So you can kind of curate your Orb to, if you have Blizzard as your only 6 mana spell, that does a lot of damage into Tsunami. And then, Tsunami, the water elementals can go face. All 3 of them could go face. And then you top that off with Sunset Volley, and your Orb is looking particularly good as a way of everything going face.
In regards to no minion mage, I'm talking about the other cards. I'm talking about Go with the Flow, Seareach Chalice, Maroon Archmage, Rising Waves, and Tide Pools. Those all feel like they could potentially go into the no minion mage and maybe supplement some other cards and make them stronger.
Potentially. The interesting thing about the no minion mage is not a lot of spell damage cards, except if you roll the one elemental companion that gives you spell damage. So
and then copy it, and then hit me in the face for like 38 damage on turn 4. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, but there's only so much space in the deck, right? And so the deck will usually run like 1 copy a minion card, something like that. And if you are trying to fit in Chalice or Go with the Flow, you have to cut something else. So it's, we're not playing all of the cards. You do have to make some choices. But I do see something like Tide Pools being a strict upgrade over some other cards in, no spell mage or no minion mage. So it's, we'll see how that goes. I think what most people will be brewing is Big Spell Mage. And again, the defining card here for me is Tsunami above everything else. And I think the paladin tourism is kind of interesting. We'll see how that goes. If you wanted to do something like Sith Mage to get a holy spell, but I don't think I'm not really convinced by that. We have seen other very interesting, like, I don't know what's called, a tempo mage decks in the past. One came out that had a whole bunch of freeze effects during, I think it was March of the Lich King. And anyway, it just played really efficiently, and it was kind of fit into the meta in a really unique way. These cards kind of strike me as potentially doing that as well. I've been kind of discouraged from the last 2-3 mage sets. I didn't think they were particularly interesting. I'm really excited about this one, just because it feels like all these cards are very flexible, but they still have kind of a guidance to them as to what we're trying to do.
I think the most interesting card, I mean, obviously Tsunami is really good, which is, I don't know if we haven't said it yet. Tsunami is 8 mana, summon 3/6 water elementals that freeze. They always have to say that. They attack random enemies. So these all go face if the board's clear. It freezes whoever attacks. It has a very, very powerful effect. The card I'm most interested in, though, is Rising Waves. Because this is, so you remember, we have Defile math where you have to figure out, how do I get this organized so Defile clears the board? And then you have the same thing with, what's the Death Knight one? The new one?
Threads of Despair.
Yeah. You have to figure out this. This one is deal 2 damage to all minions. If none die, deal 2 more. So I kind of I think that's going to be very, very powerful. And I think that's going to be a nice way to get rid of like Divine Shield minions and whatnot. So I like that card.
I think this is, I rate this at the bottom of my list. This is probably one of the worst mage cards, in my opinion.
Interesting. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I just think mage has much better AoE options, and this compares very poorly to most of them.
I could be wrong. I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to depend. Well, it depends on how the meta shakes out, right? If there's an aggro based meta, I think it can be very strong. If it's not, then whatever. Paladin has a lot of Divine Shield synergy that's building up right now, so I think that hitting Divine Shields, clearing the shields, and then hitting again, I think there's potential there, especially with maybe go with the flow with some spell damage. Now,
if we're talking about Druid doing a tourist into mage, Rising Waves is incredible, right? That gives Druid access to an AoE that it didn't have before. So we might see a lot of Rising Waves. I just don't know if it's going to be out of mage. It's much more likely going to be out of Druid, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Doc, you got any thoughts? I know that you haven't been playing that much Constructed lately. Any thoughts on the sets?
I mean, my favorite card is definitely Surfalopod. Again, specifically because the artwork. It's an adorable little octopus that's just attached to a surfboard. I also like the Little Mermaid reference in Under the Sea. I don't know. I mean, this stuff looks fun. As you guys talked about last week, right? Sage was the design lead on the set. And I know he didn't design every single card, right? But Sage is very good at the things he decides to do. So I think overall for this expansion, it's probably going to be more great than not, as far as just like how the expansion feels. Granted, we're looking at everything in a vacuum, so it's harder to like actually figure out like how things are going to shake out, right? But I really like the design of most of the mage cards. I think King Tide is going to be a very, very fun card. It's going to enable a lot of things. But also Druid granted, we're not really seeing too much like Beast Druid, but Beast Druid used to very much be a thing back in the day. So Druid getting a card that enables them to get a free spell, depending on what spells Druids decide to run more of. I think that's going to be a fun time for Druid as well as Mage with Surfalopod.
I want to bring this back to Sea Shanty real quick. So we've talked about Sea Shanty being an interesting card in Paladin because Paladin, Taurus, and Rogue, where it'll draw different cards and summon 3/5/5 pirates, cost 1 less for each spell you've cast this game. Okay, sure, that's great. But now let's move it forward back to Mage. Mage, which now Taurus and Paladin. And Paladin has Sea Shanty. Mage now has spells like Cephalopods, which Battlecry, the next spell you draw is cast when drawn. And Under the Sea, which is draw a different spell, summon a random minion of that same spell's cost. You could possibly, maybe there's some kind of like, when they built these cards, they're like, okay, what if we're going to build a card and there's going to be a tourist card into it and a tourist card out of it? Like, how do we make both of those things interesting? And I'm not saying that this will be good. I'm not saying that we're going to have a Cephalopod, deck along with the Paladin, along with the other card there, the Sea Shanty. But it almost like looking at that, I just kind of made the connection there. That's like, yeah, you can do it with the Paladin rogue cards, but also the Mage has some synergy with that particular card as well. What are your thoughts on that, WorldEight?
Oh yeah, I mean, now you're cooking. That's exactly the kind of thing that I look for, is how do we cheat things out. I think they probably anticipated that one, but you can do I think something interesting there. So we'll see how it goes. But that definitely, Sea Shanty could definitely be part of a big spell mage. On the lower end, if you need spells to enable Sea Shanty, you have the Volleyball. You could equip that. Hard to say how that would be better than keyboard, but if you really needed something, you could get your Sunscreens or your Tide Pool. One of the things that I think is important to note about Sea Shanty is that if you send a fireball to their face, Sea Shanty discounts by 1. It's just have to be cast on a character. It could be your opponent's face too.
Fair enough. And yeah, so that's all I'm thinking is I'm wondering if, hopefully I just gave you an idea there. I want to see the deck that you come up with from that. But I'm hoping that all these tourist kind of things have back and forth, like, hey, the tourist is coming from and the tourist is going to. There are cards that work differently in each of them, but that can kind of go through 3 different classes in some way. So I'm interested to see how that goes.
Right. Well, I mean, you could, in terms of like, we have the neutrals that we're going to go into in a minute here, but, I could definitely see, so Ralia, Sand Sculptor, is the Paladin Tourist card, which summons a random 2-cost minion and Divine Shield. And then we have 2 ways to discount the sunscreens to 0. First of all, we have the Marooned Archmage. First spell is 2 less. But then more specifically in the neutrals, which we can talk about later, Concierge, your cards from other classes cost 1 less, and this is a 3-mana 3/4. So you could pretty easily take your Concierge, curve that into your Sand Sculptor, and just drop a whole bunch of Sunscreens and get a whole board. So could be interesting.
Fair enough. And I wasn't going to get too deep into the neutrals. We talked a little about them last week. Are there any particular ones that stand out to you? I want to say that I do like that the one card that you have to start off the event with. They've been doing that a lot lately. Like, you have to summon this card or do this card's effect. This one was the free one they gave you. So, like, you had to cast one of Marlin's Wonderful Treasure. So I like that was kind of like, here's the free card, go use it. I like that better than, what was the one, the Gigantify Minimize one? You have to play it or kill it. It's like, no one has that card because no one's playing that card, so people aren't crafting that card. That kind of sucked. But I like the way they're doing this one. But are there any neutral minions that are kind of standing out to you?
Oh yeah, we've got quite a few neutral minions that I think are going to see a lot of impact right away. In terms of, we're just coming off of Mage here. Tide Pool Pupil, which is a 1-mana 2/1 Naga. Battlecry, if you've cast 3 spells, discover one of them. I think that's going to be a big impact on Mage. It just fits right in to, I played some high impact spell and I want to get it back. Also on the lower end, I think we're going to see a lot of the new Amalgam, which is a 1/2, permanently keeps enchantments, all minion types. There is a lot of possibility with this one, where you can magnetize it with different keywords. You can buff it with a huge variety of things in terms of stat buffs. You can give it rush with a lot of other effects, but you can do other more interesting things with like Death Growl. You can give this Reska's Death Growl, and it'll have that for the rest of the game, that it'll steal a minion. A lot of possibilities for the Amalgam. One of the challenges is being, if it goes back into your deck, how do you get it again? Someone else, it's been mentioned that you could put this with Boogie Down, so that basically you always have Boogie Down targets, which has been a challenge in the past. So those are the two on kind of on the lowest end there, and then we have a huge bunch of pirates, right? So one of the problems that we've had with pirates up until this point is we don't have a lot of good pirates on the low end, and here we are. We've got a lot of really good pirates. I'm not going to go through all of them, but one of the ones that stands out is the Sailboat Captain, which gives a friendly pirate Wind Fury. That's pretty. Wind Fury is a a very powerful keyword. So there's a lot going on in the neutrals in terms of Marin, just a terrific card. We've seen already, doesn't go in every deck. I think we'll see Grifta in most decks. That's the card that you discover an amulet. It's a 4-mana 4/5. You discover an amulet, you give your opponent a phony version. What seems powerful to me about this is the one-sidedness. It's very unfair. Any card that is unfair with a good stat line like Grifta immediately is, I think is going to see play. So, imagine you're in a scenario where you're on the defensive and you discover the amulet that gives you 12 health and your opponent's full life. Like, what, that amulet doesn't do anything for them, but you've just saved the game. Gorgonzola, it might be, or the Gorgonzormu, sorry. Battlecry, get it 3 mana 3/3, get a 2 cost cheese. It summons 3 1 cost minions. This card is insane. This is probably one of the most powerful cards in the set so far, in my opinion. Easily drop this on 3 and you'll be getting good cheese later on. Goes. There are decks that it can go into right away. Zarimi Priest is a terrific candidate for this one. It's not really a card that you build around too much, but even for just waiting one turn for your 2 cost cheese to summon 3 2/2s, seems very serviceable in most cases. So I think out of the neutrals, those are a few of the standouts to me.
I think there's a couple. I want to ask you about a couple. I think one interesting one is the when I say interesting about these cards, I'm not saying they're good. I'm not going to say they're going to see play. I think Bathan Bodybuilder is an interesting card because it could be tech against Rogue with the against Warlock with the Death Rattle minion, which is after any minion is summoned for your opponent during your turn, silence and destroy it. So that feels like a very interesting tech card. You can also kind of pair that with Dirty Rat and try to hope to destroy one of the cards you don't want them to see, because it silences it first and then destroys it, so it doesn't have the Death Rattle. So I think that'll be interesting. But the cards I want to ask you about are Overplanner, which is discover 3 cards in your deck and put them on top in that order. So you're essentially scrying 3 cards and kind of organizing them in the way that you'd want to play them. And the other is Dread Deserter, which has charge if this didn't start in your deck. Have you been thinking about those cards? What are your thoughts on them?
I think Overplanner is probably going to be one of the more overrated cards. Each discovery is unique, so you do get to discover your next card. But in terms of discovering the follow-up card and then even the third card, it actually is going to be a little hard to plan because the game state changes so much over the course of 3 turns. I think a lot of players would be like, oh, this is really not the card that I wanted 3 turns later, although it will fix, mana curve things. 3 turns seems forever, especially if you're dropping this on turn 6, you've summoned a 3/3, and the game might be over before you even get to that third discover. You've effectively done a dredge, right? Like a triple dredge here. So I think we'll see a lot of the card. I don't think it's that great. Maybe I'll eat my words on that one. I think Dread Deserter takes a lot of work to get online. Because you can't, you'd have to get a copy of it somehow. You can't just bounce it back to your hand with like a brewmaster, but something like Zola would work, but you'd have to start with the 6/6 to begin with. I think the obvious way to do that is with ETC. ETC, from what I understand, the Deserter would have charge coming from the ETC since it starts in your sideboard, not your deck. So we could definitely see something there, but I think, seeing the going rate of Leroy, right? 5 mana for 6 charge. The toughness doesn't matter terribly much there, right? For Leroy, you're mostly using it to end games. So it's a lot of work for the Deserter. I'm not sure how much we'll see of it.
I do know that if any pirate decks exist and becomes popular, we're all going to die to a Bloodsail Recruiter generating a Dread Deserter and then being hit by a Sailboat Captain. And we're just going to be salty about it because pirates and salt.
Yep, and salt. Got it. Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts. You guys have any final thoughts on these cards before we move on? We'll cover some more cards next week.
I'm impressed with the set. I feel like there's a lot of guidance here, but especially with the tourist cards, a lot of possibilities. We're almost getting like 1.5 sets just because of the tourism mechanic. I think the format's going to speed up a little bit, mostly because all of these pirates coming in. I don't know if Standard remembers how fast pirates are, but they are very, they will speed up the games quite a bit. And I think there's a lot of fun things in here that, continuing on with this celebration year are very much themes that are popular with players like Big Spell Mage.
Fair enough. I've seen a lot of cards I'm looking forward to not playing in my deck, but generating. Like Snoozing Zookeeper is going to be a lot of fun when you generate it and play it, but it's not something you're ever going to run. So Snoozing Zookeeper is a 7 mana 5/8 battle cry. Summon an 8/8 beast for your opponent. It attacks all of their minions. So you're never going to want to play that, but when you generate it and it clears the board for you, you're going to feel really good. How about yourself, Doc? Do you have any thoughts on this set?
Yeah, I think Hearthstone is at its best when it's silly, funny, and quirky, and is not taking itself super seriously, which is very much what this set is doing, with the vibe and the theme and everything. And like I said, Sage is just on another level with how he performs and anything he decides he wants to do well at. So Sage and the rest of Team 5, seemingly so far with this set, have, in my opinion, knocked it out of the park with the theme and with the mechanics that are available and everything. And we get extra toys because of dual class, so we get more opportunity to play with everything. So like WorldEight said, it's like we're getting a set and a half instead of just a set when this comes out, which I very much agree with. Yeah, I just think it's going to be a fun time, and I can't wait to get my teeth back into Standard once this set comes out.
I'm very interested to see if any class plays the tourists and leans really hard into the cards from the other set, like not just like a few cards, but like really kind of like finds an archetype where, and I don't see anything yet, but like I'm playing like class mage and I'm leaning into the tourist cards from the class, whatever I get from that, and really synergizing like half a deck of those cards with something else. I don't know. It'll be interesting if we see anything like that. But who knows? So anyway, guys, I'm really full, but I think I have a little room for dessert. Good. What do you think?
So WorldEight, what is your ideal summer dinner?
So we make something that we call summer pasta. So summer pasta is you take, we live in New Jersey and we have access to a lot of really great local farm stands that sell vegetables, fruits too. But this dish is you take your summer corn, tomatoes, peppers, onions, anything you can find at the local farmer stand, and you chop it all up and you kind of make this mix and you serve it over, some kind of pasta. We'll usually have spaghetti for the boys, but any pasta will service. A little bit of seasoning, put some basil on it, just a really fresh summer dish. And you can only really have it in the summer because of the ingredients being fresh themselves.
Really good.
Fantastic. Doc, before you get to the next part,
yes.
There are 2 reviews to read in the...
Yep.
Okay, good. Just making sure.
So listeners, please leave us a review. We prefer 5 stars because it helps with visibility, but give us the rating that you feel like we deserve in your opinion, because we want to make this show the best it can be for you and the best it can be for us, because we enjoy doing the show and we just want it to continue being a good experience. And if you do leave us reviews, we'll read them out on the show. So our first review is by Curse7781, titled Love Hearthstone. This is the show just for you. Our 2 hosts, Doc and Tito, talk about Hearthstone, either how to improve as a player by making the right plays to understanding the game itself, so the climb to legend can get easier each month. A podcast that has chill vibes, atmosphere, and aim towards players that are passionate about Hearthstone. What more can you ask for? Curse, thank you so much. Do you want to read the next one?
I've been called a lot of things. I have rarely ever been called chill. So I appreciate that. All right, sure. And the next one is by somebody named Reviews Should Be Fun. Another 5-star review. Thank you very much. And both these fine folks were entered into the bundle giveaway. Unfortunately, they didn't win, but we appreciate you anyway. Doc and Tita do a great job laying out the info for listeners who want to keep up with the newest additions to the game, as well as strategies for getting better. Perfect for Hearthstone players of any skill level, and their guests have been top-notch. Well worth the listen. And the thing I will agree with the most here is we have the most awesome, fantastic, amazing, world-class guests on our show every week in and week out.
Absolutely. So, WorldEight, where can people find you on social media?
So I am on Discord probably the most. You just find me as WorldEight. I will, probably engage with you if you're a Hearthstone enthusiast. I'm in most of the various Discords that chat about these things. Otherwise, I will post a lot of deck lists to Twitter, WorldEight_HS, things that I've built, things that I find interesting. And, I'm one of those people that are like, I'll stream a little bit more. But on Twitch, World_8. And that's all spelled out, not numerically, just, spell the word out and you'll find me.
Well, you've been streaming about as much as Doc lately. Doc, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Doc McButt. And I have discovered that I need a power line adapter because my Wi-Fi dongle is starting to go out. So that's fun. So once I get the power line adapter, hopefully I'll do a couple streams a month. I'm not looking to go super hard at it again, but just to do it as something casual and for fun. How about yourself, Tito?
Wow, there was like 3 different things Blizzard would have eaten up in that last statement. You can find me at Tito Santana HS on both Twitter and Twitch. WorldEight, you got anybody you want to shout out or anything you'd like to promote this week?
Always a big shout out to the designer of the latest set, so Sage. Great job. Really excited for this set. I think that would be my biggest shout out this week.
Doc?
First and foremost, WorldEight. I know we said it at the top of the show, but thank you again so much for being on. It is always fun to talk Hearthstone with you, because you are very intelligent and analytical about how you perceive Hearthstone. So it is fun to hear it from your perspective, because it's not a perspective that I have. So I feel like whenever I talk to you, I'm sitting in like a college lecture and I'm just getting all this crazy information just blasted at me. In the most respectful way possible. You're just very informed and you have a very educational approach to how you explain things. And I love hearing you talk Hearthstone. as a non-guest shout out, I'll just shout out my brother. It was fun seeing him up here when he was finishing up on that movie he was working on. He's just a good guy. I miss him. Wish we lived closer. Trying to get him to move up here, but that might be a little bit more of a process. How about yourself, Tito?
Well, I'm going to echo WorldEight, and getting guests for this show, believe it or not, isn't the easiest thing in the world. And having repeat guests that are so intelligent and fun to talk to and can bring such insight into the topics we're talking about is amazing. I love having WorldEight on. Looking forward to having you on plenty over the next few months or whatever years, hopefully, just like Dragon Rider and Pilot and whoever else comes on the show quite often. So thank you for that. I also want to shout out Just the Guy. He knows why. And I'm also going to shout out Judge, who, like I said, I had a stream with him Friday night. It was a blast. It was an absolute blast. We did not improve as much in his arena as I would have liked to, and he would have liked to, but it was probably the most fun stream I've had probably in 2024. He's so personable and fun, and we just had a blast, and the community had a blast. So thank you to Judge. But anyway, guys, I think that's it. I think we're toast. We'll see you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you guys.
Slide two brothers meet one another when they slide up to the mic. It's bread and butter with one another. Let's start up that recording light.